So today's topic is free thought without fear, reporting hate crimes and protecting yourself. Our speaker is David Condo, and I heard David speak at the Secular Coalition for America members meeting in Washington, D.C. in March of this year. And I just knew his topic would be of value to our secular groups here in Colorado. So I invited him then and there. I said, come to Colorado and talk to our groups. David Condo joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1999. He worked on white-collar crime and online child exploitation investigations in Baltimore, Maryland for 7 years and was a founding member of the Innocent Images International Task Force. He then worked in various leadership roles and other assignments in Washington, D.C., Phoenix, Arizona, Anchorage, Alaska, and Cincinnati, Ohio. David's first experience with the secular community was attending the Godless Americans March on Washington in 2002, and he has supported multiple organizations over the years dedicated to the separation of religion and government. Before retiring from the FBI in 2024, he started an internal group for employees named Freethinking Feds. In January 2025, this and other internal groups were shut down because of presidential executive orders. So welcome, David Condo.
Thanks, Claudette, and good afternoon, everybody. Everybody hear me okay? All right. I want to thank the Secular Hub and FFR of Denver for the opportunity to speak today. I was very happy when I first met Claudette in DC earlier this year, and the fact that I was a former FBI agent did not send her running in the opposite direction. That is not always the case. I've had a variety of reactions to my former federal employment over the years. Some of them have been positive, some of them not so much. Kind of like sometimes when I tell somebody about my religious beliefs or lack thereof. You know, you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes, again, it can be positive or at least neutral. I'm always hoping for at least neutral. To me, that's a victory. Sometimes you'll get the side glance, and then sometimes you'll get the polite nod, but then you'll see in their eyes that they can't wait for that conversation to be over. So it's like that when I tell people I'm an FBI agent or was an FBI agent as well. But fortunately, DC went great, as Claudette said, and I'm really happy for all the work that everybody did to make today possible. This presentation and the initiative of Freethinkers Supporting Safe Streets actually started because of a conversation that I had with Margaret Downey, the founder of the Freethought Society. She had talked to me about a hate threat that she had received a while back that she had actually referred to the FBI. And my conversations with her, as well as some other folks that I've talked to over the past year, have really highlighted to me the concerns and in some cases fear that people in our community have, either about being openly non-religious or when they're just trying to benefit all of society by keeping religion and government separate. Now, whether their fear was due to threats that were made against them specifically, or whether it was due to the general negativity that sometimes our community feels in the rest of society, their anxiety was very real and very impactful. So when I talked to them, they did emphasize to me that it was comforting when they had a positive experience with law enforcement, whether that was due to an actual investigation that was started, or whether it's just through a conversation they had with law enforcement about safety. In general, people felt more empowered when they had an open line of communication with either their local police department or with their local FBI office. So it's those types of relationships, as well as hate crime specifically, that I want to talk about today. All right, so I will give a basic overview of the FBI, as well as an introduction to hate crimes. And I'll talk about how reporting hate crimes helps both the Freethought community and law enforcement. I'll then talk about how individuals and organizations can better protect yourselves against some of the threats that are out there. And then I'll also emphasize resilience as something we need to concentrate on, as well as prevention, and how to build trust on both sides with law enforcement. And then finally, as Claudette mentioned, we'll have an extended Q&A session where I'll go into detail about any one of the points that you'll see here on the screen, as well as any other topics that you want to discuss, to include how we can accomplish our goals even in the current social and political landscape. But before we do that, I have to throw up a disclaimer. So although I'm retired from federal service, I'm still very sensitive when it comes to matters of representation. So I want to make it absolutely clear that I am not employed by or represent any government agency today. I'm going to have some opinions that I'll talk about, but those opinions are mine and mine alone. And keep in mind that no one agent or retired agent can speak with both expertise and authority about every aspect of the FBI or government for that matter. Agents have different careers, different adventures, and different perspectives, and I'm only here to give my own. And I'm also here to not criticize religion. So if there's anybody here or online that is religious, that's great. You're in a wonderful position to be allies for freedom. This whole initiative is about finding areas of common interest, whether it's in security or just basic law and order or in civil rights. So everybody's welcome. And one final disclaimer, this one mostly for the Q&A session. The FBI is not responsible in any way for my sense of humor. Right? And I've only developed it recently. I was serious for 25 straight years, folks. So if I'm a little more jovial than usual today, it's just because I'm making up for lost time, all right? I also intentionally made these PowerPoint slides as basic as possible. I'm not a PowerPoint wizard anyway, but I deliberately wanted to emphasize the unofficial nature of our discussions today. So just keep that in mind when you see these on the screen. All right, like this slide, for instance. The FBI's recruiting efforts have benefited from Hollywood over the years. I was personally inspired by Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. But the depiction of the Bureau has been both a blessing and a curse over that time. I never did find the X-Files during my career, unfortunately. And like those gentlemen on the top right there, I never rode in a helicopter while wearing a full suit. Not sure why that would happen. Anybody know the name of that movie?
Die Hard.
All right, very impressive. Yes, Die Hard. Again, my opinion, but I think Die Hard's a great movie. Terrible depiction of FBI agents, just horrible and not realistic at all. Anyway, I did get to travel the country and the world when it came to my investigations, as well as visit a lot of FBI offices, like the ones that you see here. So the FBI does have its main headquarters in Washington, D.C. that houses a lot of administrative personnel as well as some of its executives. But the bulk of the investigative work is done in the field offices that are both in our major cities, like here in Denver, as well as the hundreds of satellite offices that we have across the United States. I say that because a lot of headlines that you see in the news have to do with what's going on the Beltway in D.C. But so much work of the Bureau, including all the investigations to include hate crimes, are done outside of that political spectrum. So yeah, this map has been updated again, but every American has a local FBI office that they can go to that works the mission of the FBI, which is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States, with both parts of that mission to be very, very important, what we do and how we do it. Now, civil rights investigations are one of the FBI priorities you'll see over on the top right there, along with counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cybercrime, oh, there we go with the lights, public corruption, criminal enterprises, white-collar crime, and violent crime. So the FBI has a very broad spectrum when it comes to the violations that it works, a lot of investigative diversity. And the local field offices are organized according to those priorities, which means that, say here in Denver, you will have squads with this basic structure: a supervisor, a group of special agents, and then intelligence analysts, task force officers, and other supportive administrative personnel. This is what the Bureau is made of, squads all across the country like this. But in addition to these squads, we also have experts in a variety of fields that service all operations and all priorities. And these are not agents necessarily. I say this because A lot of people think the FBI is made up entirely of special agents, okay? And that we all act like Mr. Smith in the Matrix, okay? That is not the case. There's Mr. Smith down to the bottom left there. I like Mr. Smith. He has wonderful fashion sense, but he does not uphold the US Constitution in that movie, okay? So over half of the people in the FBI are actually not agents, all right? They're just people that have a lot of knowledge in their field. They have top secret security clearances, and they prove day in and day out that you do not need a badge to make a difference, okay? One of those specialists is our victim witness personnel, who we'll talk a little bit more about later. But for now, let's talk about hate crimes. So hate crimes are exactly what is in the name legally. It is, if you reverse it, it is a crime plus hate, or an underlying criminal offense plus a motivation based on bias, okay, that hate component, if you will. A person can still be convicted for the crime itself, but the hate component is something that is additional in terms of penalty. And sometimes it's a big addition to the penalty. They can also be against property as well as people. So even if a person wasn't hurt, if a building was vandalized, for example, that is also a hate crime. And when we say bias, we are talking about the list of federally protected classes that have been made through legislation for a few decades, which are these. So religion, as you'll see, is the second bullet point there. I know many people in this room like to think of ourselves as not religious, but when it comes to the law and hate crimes, that's where this bias comes underneath that category. Now, these are the federal protected classes. States also have hate crime laws, and Department of Justice has a list on their website as to which states cover which of the federally protected classes. Colorado, for instance, covers all of these except gender or gender identity. They do not have state laws for that, but that is covered federally as well. All right, but for federal purposes, it's still the FBI that does the reporting. Now, state can prosecute cases, and a lot of cases are made at the state level because the underlying offense, whether it's assault or harassment or trespassing, those are usually state offenses, so it's easier just to tack it onto there. But the FBI's reporting process results in our Uniform Crime Report. That is a nationwide analysis of hate crimes. And it does have a category. It shows the religious category, and then within that there's a bunch of subcategories underneath religion. And one of those is called anti-atheism, agnosticism, etc. Now, I apologize for anybody who is offended by the etc. I don't think that was intentional. I think whoever wrote the report, or maybe was responsible for the data field in the coding area, they probably just ran out of room and could not include something that was more descriptive. But the FBI also has a manual that they send to local law enforcement on how to recognize hate crimes, how to report hate crimes. And that manual does specifically mention atheists. And it has the words, the existence or non-existence of a supreme being, which I was very happy to see. I realized that as a government employee, former government employee, I'm just getting very excited about one little report. I get that. But any time that our community is recognized by the government in a way that is not negative brings just a little bit of joy to my heart. So we are represented in some form when it comes to hate crimes, even if that hasn't resulted in many actual cases with atheists or freethinkers as victims, as we'll see here in a minute. Now, the official list of hate crime laws includes legislation from back in the 60s, and additions to it over the years have been either to add some additional protected classes or to provide funding or training for some specific initiatives. I'm happy to talk and hoping to talk more with lawyers in the Freethought community about these specific statutes, but I don't want to get into the legal weeds today because I don't want people to focus on that when they're thinking about whether or not to report a hate crime. I'd rather focus on the impact that hate crimes have in the community. Now, to be clear, the suffering of the victim by themselves is terrible enough, but the impact on the community can also be very real. You can find a similar effect when it comes to church-state separation matters, when we hear the constant attacks on church-state separation. Being targeted for whatever reason makes a difference, and it can make a person or a community feel even more isolated, or infuriated, or powerless. It's one of the reasons why hate crimes have been designated as something special and why extra resources have been dedicated to them over the years. But when you can reverse the effect of hate crimes, when you can turn that fear into strength and hope, when you can actually make that ripple effect a positive one, that can also be very impactful. Now, the FBI does not arrest people for free speech, even if that speech may be offensive, whether it's in a public gathering, in a pamphlet, or in an online forum. Free speech is still protected by the US Constitution, as it should be. However, that speech does not include specific types of harassment or threats. And prosecutors can look at multiple factors when deciding whether or not something meets the criteria for a hate crime. So these are some of the threats: the clarity, directness, manner of delivery, etc. But again, I don't want to get too much into these because I want people to remember instead that just threats by themselves can be hate crimes, all right? And that's why all of them should be reported. Even if it doesn't meet the criteria for a full investigation right away, you want to be able to build on the data that you receive in order to make a better case down the road. All right, here are a couple examples. So here's a gentleman on the side of the road. Looks like he's holding an American flag. He's got an expletive written on his t-shirt as well as the word Islam underneath. Now, this is free speech, right? Except if he's, assuming he's not trespassing on the side of the road. He can stand there, he can wave his flag, he can wear his t-shirt. Now, if he starts assaulting somebody with that flagpole while yelling racial slurs at them, or slurs against their religion, against somebody who was a Muslim or who he thought was a Muslim, because perception is very important, then that would be a hate crime, all right? But if he's just standing there, that's free speech. This is not free speech, okay? This is vandalism. This is somebody writing "Die Jews" on a garage door, somebody's personal garage door. That is a threat of violence. That is a hate crime. As is this, somebody's writing "Kill the gay," again, on somebody's garage door. When a threat is specific, when it is personal, and when it involves a crime of violence or any other type of crime, those are factors that investigators and prosecutors can consider. Okay. So, yes, there are legal differences between hate crime, a hate incident, and other types of criminal or civil remedies. All incidents should be reported, whether it's to the online community, the online secular community, or to law enforcement, or to both. All right, so how do we report? When it comes to an assault or an active shooter or anything that involves your immediate physical safety, call 911, okay? But in general, when reporting hate crimes, it's best to call the FBI and local law enforcement because of the different roles that they play. Local police, like I said, can bring state or local charges against somebody, but they're also going to be your most direct response when it comes to crisis or physical protection. And I don't want to alarm anybody, but if an active shooter came in here right now, we would not be calling the FBI right away. We would be calling 911, okay? And then they can contact the FBI afterwards. But the FBI's role is more about taking referrals, connecting the dots, analyzing trends, and then yes, in some cases, working hate crime investigations, either because the local department can't or won't work them, or sometimes we will partner with a local police agency to work a joint investigation with them. Now, do you need to contact the local police before you contact the FBI and vice versa? No, not at all. If you want to contact the Bureau directly, that's absolutely fine. And you should also contact the Bureau about other crimes that not necessarily do involve hate. We'll talk about those in a second. Now, these circumstances can be very fact-specific. So if you're assaulted for whatever reason and the 911 is called, the police are responding, you're going to be interviewed right there at the scene as to what happened. And in that case, you should give all the information you can to the officer, both what happened with the crime, if you know about the person's motivation, whether it involved hate or not. Everything should go to the responding officer. And then you can also follow up with additional reporting later. It just depends. But whatever a person's situation, I want to help victims of the secular community when it comes to hate crimes. This is part of the Freethought Society's initiative. This is something that I want to do in my retirement. It's something I feel very strongly about. I don't think any atheist, agnostic, free thinker, humanist, anybody in our community should have their voice silenced or should not be able to receive the guidance that they need. That's something that I want to provide. My conversations with everybody are not formal. Again, I am retired. So I can even do a practice interview with a victim to give them a better idea of the questions they might be asked or the information that they have that might be extra helpful to investigators or detectives. And after I do all of that work with them, the ultimate decision of whether or not to report something to law enforcement is going to be completely up to the victim, okay? And if they don't want to report to law enforcement after that, that is completely fine. It's all what's best for them. It's important to give, after somebody has experienced something like that, to give them the knowledge and the choice of what to do next back to them, okay? And if a victim does choose to report, I can be on the phone with them. It can be a three-way call when they call their local department or the FBI, or I can be on the phone with them when they submit a tip online. I just don't want anybody to feel isolated or to think that help is not available in these situations, because it is. Now, the FBI also has a response guide, and we'll email that to Claudette. She can have an electronic copy of it. It has a variety of scenarios in it, both for individuals and organizations, about what to do and not do when they experience something. Okay, so why should a person report? What are the benefits? First of all, even though reporting a crime might seem like a logical choice, something happens to you, you want to talk about it, unless you've been in the victim's shoes, don't underestimate how difficult that phone call can be. But it's similar to why we should report church-state separation matters. Our activist organizations can't defend that separation unless we tell them about the issues that we see, whether they're in our legislatures, in our courtrooms, in our schools, or elsewhere. Law enforcement is the same. They can't address hate crimes or even know the true extent of them unless we come forward and speak up about it. So I'll drill down on a couple of these points. From an investigator's perspective, reports, especially multiple reports, establish a pattern of behavior that I, as an agent, could use against either an individual or a group that engages in hate behavior. So even if one person's referral doesn't result in an investigation right away, a collection of them over time could result in opening the case or enhancing the case down the road. Say, for example, a criminal assaults a humanist, okay? But during the assault itself, there is no evidence of that bias that we talked about earlier. There's no evidence of that specific hate. However, independent of that assault, law enforcement might have prior reports of that subject making hate speech, even if that speech was protected by the First Amendment at the time. That previous information can be brought in to the new investigation to help make that case for bias. But you'll notice how prosecution is only one of the benefits that's listed up there. It's something that people are familiar with. It is a goal that we want and a goal the victim deserves, but prosecution is something that is often beyond our control because it's not even up to the local law enforcement or the FBI. It's up to the local prosecutors, the DA's office, and the US Attorney's Office. So the intelligence value of benefit can be very beneficial when it comes to statistics. The FBI constantly analyzes crime trends to determine where to put its resources that are going to have the most impact. And as part of that analysis, it asks questions like, has there been a rise in hate crimes? Where has this rise been happening? Has it been across the country or in certain regions of the country? Who is committing these hate crimes? Certain groups more than others. Who are the victims of the hate crimes? Certain groups more than others. And of course, how can we stop them and make sure that we can prevent them from happening? These are all great questions, but the answers that law enforcement gets and the final decisions that are made are only going to be as good as the data that they have. And if they're operating in a vacuum, they're not going to be making the best decisions possible. That is something that we can contribute to. When it comes to victim health, reporting can also help a victim's mental health. We've seen it time and time again. And by extension, their physical health. People don't want to feel powerless, and even if the report that they make and any initial efforts they make after that, it might not have its original intended impact, but just the knowledge that they did everything that they could to either get justice or to help somebody down the road, that can go a long way when dealing with an incident. And yes, part of that help for somebody down the road can be inspiring others. I know personally when I read about stories of victims coming forward and speaking up, it's inspiring to me. It makes me want to go out and make a difference. So whether it's to a fellow survivor or whether it's just to an average citizen, I know that free thinkers like to think of ourselves as people of the mind. And we are. I think we're people of great minds, but we're also people of heart. And stories of courage where people come forward, that can really inspire hearts to action. And it's more of that action that we need when it comes to this particular movement. Now, part of that action could be helping the victim as much as possible. So even though it's terrible that hate crimes have been around for so long, it has allowed some experts to get a lot more knowledge about the initial effects and the long-term effects of hate crimes. So the FBI Victim Witness Services helps thousands of people per year, and state and local offices also have resources, as well as a lot of nonprofit organizations. Part of the help I can provide is to help facilitate connections between these, both within the criminal justice community and outside of it. It's not required, but it's an additional option that we can bring to the victim if they're interested. Some of these resources came from the Department of Justice websites, but DOJ also has a list of hate crimes that they have successfully prosecuted over the years. And if you're into criminal summaries, if you're into case studies, these can actually be a good read. They have a lot of lessons learned in there, like hate crimes where somebody made threats against organizations, but they made threats against multiple organizations, and nobody knew about each other's threats until they actually reported it to law enforcement. So again, if you receive a threat, it's probably not going against just you. They're like doing the shotgun approach, and they're attacking every equal opportunity attacker, so to speak. In another case, a student at a university was making hate crimes, and they were prosecuted because hate crimes can and do happen at our schools. And in another case, a hate crime was made, a threat was made by somebody who was later arrested by weapons charges. So it just goes to show you that on the internet, sometimes threats are empty, and sometimes they are not. You do not know how dangerous a person is behind that threat just based upon the email that you receive or the chat that you're looking at in a forum. So it's best to report all of the activity. And in one hate crime news, a subject was found not just to be practicing their particular ideology, they were also planning a terrorist attack on a critical infrastructure in the United States. So this is one example of why it's very important to report hate early before it escalates into something else. The FBI has a behavioral analysis unit where it has profilers. These are the profilers that were made famous for their work in serial killers, but they also analyze a lot of other types of crimes. And one of the things that they found is that violent people usually don't become violent overnight. It's a progression, and a progression with signs that we can see. Threats can be one of those signs. The FBI has deterred a lot of incidents just by knocking on somebody's door and talking to them. And it's great when that happens. But the FBI can't get to those doors unless they know about that person first. So again, that's something that we can contribute to. Unfortunately, what is not on the DOJ site is a single example, I know because I reviewed every single one of them, a single example of a hate crime where an atheist was a victim. And in the FBI's most recent uniform crime report, only 16 referrals were made in that anti-atheism, agnosticism category for an entire year. That is 1% of the total referrals that were made on the anti-religion bias. And the goal here is not to focus on statistics, but we do want statistics to be accurate. Now, it's possible that the secular community does not have as many hate crimes because we're not as identifiable as, say, other religious groups are in the general public. We don't have identical clothing that we wear. Although I do see some great clothing in the merch shop of the Secular Hub that I'll just give a plug to online. But usually, we're not as identifiable, and we don't have as many identifiable meeting places that have as many targets as other religions do. But I don't think that that's the whole story. And if there's any possibility that this number is underrepresented because we're not reporting as many hate crimes, that's something that I want to change. Just as an FYI though, all these numbers are actually underreported. The Uniform Crime Report is a conglomeration of reporting that local agencies due for the FBI for the year, but the reporting of the local agencies is not always mandatory. So these numbers are going to be underreported, which is why it is important to report both to the FBI and to local law enforcement to make sure that it gets included in the analysis that gets disseminated to the public, as well as to Congress and other decision makers. But even still, even considering all of that, that 1% still seems low to me, both because of the numbers that non-religious people currently have in the general public that you see from the latest survey results. We have a lot of representation in the public, and there is still a general negative feeling in the public towards us. So again, I think the number is higher, and every hate crime that's not reported, I think, is a loss, both to the community and to the victim that we could help get some additional resources to. What I don't want is a repeat of what happened to Asian Americans during COVID. My wife is an Asian American, and in that case, you had a very swift rise of hate against a group that up until then did not have a lot of ongoing relationships with law enforcement, for the most part. And what happened was law enforcement and this community had to come together on short notice, try to build trust, and then address the threat the best they could. Okay? That is not an ideal situation. We've seen time and again in this country how hatred and intolerance and scapegoats can rise up for political reasons or what have you. And it's best if we develop our partnerships with law enforcement and with other services before something like that happens. Okay? And if we do all that, let's say we do all that, we raise awareness in the secular community, and after all that work, we don't experience as many hate crimes as we expected. Well, first of all, that would be a great thing. If less attacks happen because we're prepared, that's a huge win. But I also think that this initiative doesn't have to be a high volume effort to be effective. If we can help just one victim by doing all of this, to me, that's a win. But also having a reporting process in place, ready to go, tested, and known about, that can be valuable just in and of itself. Because knowing that is there can help both victims and help the many people who think that they might be the next victim by being a contingency for them. Okay, contingencies. The things that we definitely need to have even if we never ever want to use them. And while preventing hate crimes is definitely one of the goals and very important, so is having confidence in our resiliency towards them. In the security world, for example, companies and individuals put a lot of effort into preventing something bad from happening. Okay? That is perfectly understandable, whether it's a cyber attack or a fraud or a crime of violence, but then those people also still worry about something bad from happening because they put all their eggs in the prevention bucket. It's best to have a balance. For home security, for example, should you lock your front door? Yes, you should lock your front door. You should lock it with a deadbolt, even put a safety bar underneath there, under the doorknob if you want to be extra diligent. But you shouldn't buy 10 locks for your front door and then do nothing else for home security or home insurance or home fires or anything else and think that's the best solution. It's not. And when it comes to hate crimes, when we want to reduce their impact on the community, it's not about stopping every single hate crime from happening, because we can't do that realistically. I wish that we could, but we can't, at least not in the short term. It's more about our community having enough networks and knowledge and strength so that we feel confident that we can withstand any attacks, any storms that come our way, whether those storms are here right now or whether they're a couple years away. And part of those resources can include working with law enforcement. But before I talk about working with law enforcement, I want to talk about some other threats that are out there that can be harmful no matter what the motivation is behind them. So security is not new. Cybercrime, like denial of service attacks, computer breaches, those have been around for a while, even if there's constant innovation when it comes to the approaches that they use. And these other updates to cybercrime, like business email compromise, doxing, modern identity theft, and then these physical security threats like swatting, and then other types of assault. Those are all there. Those are all ways that extremists can use to harm your organization if they want to come after that. The good news is that, I promise is good. The good news is that there's plenty of information online about all of these, both with the FBI resources like the Internet Crime Complaint Center, as well as private security has a lot of tips on what to do to prevent these as well as to be resilient to them. Those are just, honestly, most of those are just reinvented versions of fraud, extortion, harassment, and social engineering schemes, just adapted to the modern age. But they can all still be very, very harmful. However, we don't have enough time to go into each one of those today, except maybe during the Q&A session. I'll be happy to answer questions then. But right now, I want to talk about a more general preventative approach that's also applicable to hate crimes, which is better communication with law enforcement. So the FBI knows that it's not easy for the average citizen to prevent and all of those crimes from happening to you. It's very difficult. And it's also difficult for law enforcement, honestly, to investigate all of those crimes without the assistance of the public, which is why citizen referrals are a part of so many successful cases over the years. But having a partnership with law enforcement, I wanted to dispel a couple myths that are out there. Having a point of contact, having an open line of communication does not mean that everybody agrees with everybody all the time. So, for instance, on religion, your point of contact with law enforcement might not agree with your religious views. I didn't agree with some of my points of contact when I worked with the FBI. That didn't matter because the issue is security. And it's that purple area right there in the center. That's what we want to get to, an area of common interest. Okay? It's also not about the government getting involved in your life. I don't know of anybody here, me included, who wants the government involved in your life. And guess what? The government doesn't want to get involved in your life either. They've got a lot of other stuff to do. So whenever you either have a liaison relationship with them, there are still boundaries, there is still privacy. Your business is still your business, okay? Except when it comes to that area of common interest. And likewise, while you might help law enforcement, because you can provide a lot of help to law enforcement, you are not going to be getting deputized anytime soon by law enforcement, okay? You won't be getting any butt guns or badges or raid jackets or other tactical gear, even if you want that stuff. Because a couple people have from the second community have asked me. I love it. I love the spirit. But that's not what it's about. It's about the value that U.S. citizens have to work against hate crimes and the value that law enforcement has to help keep you safe. All right, fortunately, there's many ways to collaborate. InfoGuard is one of the FBI's most successful liaison programs. It is focused on people in the security industry for the 16 critical infrastructures in the United States, to include leaders of nonprofit organizations. So if you fit that category, or if you're involved in any IT work whatsoever, this is a free and very valuable professional association. If you're not, you can still join a Citizens Academy that they have both in the FBI and at state or local agencies. Citizens Academy is kind of like night school for the FBI, or you go there once or twice a week for a couple months after regular business hours again. You listen to investigators and experts talk about their work. You do a couple extracurricular activities, and then when you graduate from Citizens Academy, you can be part of their alumni network, which is very valuable, as well as have a dedicated contact in the FBI office. Now, if both of those options sound a little too formal to you, or if you don't have that kind of time, you can just go to any community event where there is a police outreach booth, walk up to them and have a conversation. Believe me, I've worked in those booths. We want people to come up and talk to us. Please, give us something to do, talk to us. So talk to your local police officer. Even if they're nice to you, thank them for their service. Any professional, friendly interaction that our community has with law enforcement can help remove that stigma or negative feeling that some people, not all people, but that some people have, okay? It's another step towards building bridges. Now, a lot of agencies, especially the larger agencies, also have full-time outreach coordinators in their department. In smaller agencies, it might just be the police chief and other people who do it on an ad hoc basis. But the larger agencies and the federal agencies have people dedicated full-time to this. And your local organization can reach out to them and arrange a meeting. We actually are on an ongoing effort to do that here with the local FBI office. So these are what these people do. This is their job. So they'll be actually happy to take your phone call. And they have connections to all of these other options that we see up here. If you're lucky, your local FBI office or your local attorney's office, a U.S. attorney's office, or even DA's office, might have a working group, a civil rights working group, where you have civilian leaders meet with law enforcement leaders maybe once or twice a year in person, just to get together and shake hands and all that jazz. And then they'll reach out to each other on an as-needed basis throughout the year when something comes up. So sometimes liaison can be as simple and as low maintenance as that. All right, here are some photos of outreach activities. These are stock photos, so everybody's shiny, happy people sort of thing. You see those smiles there. You see on the top is events from local agencies. The one over to the right there is the kid with the officer in the dunking booth. If you're an adult doing liaison, I don't think the dunking booth should be your first option. That might send the wrong message to law enforcement, but for kids, it's great. And the bottom row of pictures are from citizens academies. I know I said you weren't going to get bulletproof vests. The people on the far right there, that's during a very mock training demonstrative exercise. It is optional, you do not have to do it. Those are not real guns that they're holding. They are the simunition, the effect of paintball guns. And again, it's one of the small extracurricular activities they do. Most of the time, you're in the classroom listening to executives or investigators talk about their work. And then the gentleman on the far left, he is not under arrest. That is a suit that our bomb technicians use to protect themselves. That thing gets very hot very quickly, which might be why he's raising his arms and the gentleman behind him is laughing his butt off because he's so happy that he's not in the suit. So anyway, it's good fun, but it also builds good relationships. To be honest, there's not room for everybody in these programs. I am willing to make phone calls to help introduce you to any of these. That's something I'm happy to do, but space is limited. But to be honest, not everybody wants to do these programs, and that's perfectly okay. But if there's somebody in your group who you think this might appeal to, they can go to something like this, and then they can bring the benefits and the knowledge and the contacts that the rest of the group will be able to use. Okay. One of the purposes of these groups is to dispel misunderstandings on both sides, okay? We like to go to those groups to dispel misunderstandings about freethinkers, to show other citizens that freethinkers are not the enemy. We are just law-abiding citizens who want a safer world like everybody else because it's our world too. And with law enforcement, they want to talk about misunderstandings that the public has about them. And I also want to talk about today. So again, in the Q&A session, if you have questions about law enforcement with the FBI, send them my way. Even if they're tough questions build trust, or at least a common understanding that we can work from. So bring it on today. They can also clarify expectations about what law enforcement can and cannot do, because we cannot do everything that Hollywood says that we could. Or in some cases, we can, but we can't do it as fast as Hollywood says, and there's a lot more paperwork involved. So to bring that sense of realism into the discussion, if you call the FBI about a potential crime, okay, we are not going to immediately deploy tinted Suburbans to your house to ask about it, okay? And we're not going to fly in a SWAT team to your office building. That is not how the FBI works. I've spoken to a variety of business executives over the years, everything from small business owners to Fortune 500 companies. And the CEOs, or their equivalents, and their legal teams were initially very apprehensive about calling the FBI, even when they were victims, because they thought that, again, we were going to roll up in a van, take their computers away, or take them away, and then call a press conference for whatever reason. That is not how the FBI works, okay? You are the victim in the situation, just like the bank teller is a victim during a bank robbery, okay? You're to be treated with care and compassion, okay? So when you call the FBI, it's going to be a conversation. Okay, what happened? How's everybody doing? What's the status of things? And here are some options, okay? No vans, no FBI raid jackets, conversations first. All right, and if the Bureau does decide to open a case to see who victimized you, it doesn't have any interest in collecting information that it doesn't need for the investigation or that you don't want to give. So for example, for a company, if they're a victim of a computer intrusion, yes, will we ask for network logs or IP addresses if you have them? Yes, that is standard. Do we care about who is stealing the treats out of the employee break room fridge? No, we don't care about that, and we're not going to ask you that. You might want us to find that out, but we're not going to figure that out for you, okay? If it's a physical security matter, we might ask for video surveillance footage of the building. Again, that is standard. If you have it, great. And if you don't have it, that is perfectly okay too. There are no requirements to being a victim. You control over what information that you provide, okay? All right, press releases are another big misunderstanding. The FBI gets plenty of press coverage, in case you guys are not aware of that. It is not interested in having more press coverage, okay? If you want to call a press conference, that is completely up to you. I wouldn't advise it, but that's up to you. The normal procedure for the Bureau is to be very discreet when it comes to any ongoing investigations. Because if it wasn't, nobody would ever call us, okay? We could do that once and they'd be like, no, we're not calling the FBI. We've only built up a relationship with the public and with companies over the years because we are keeping their interests in mind. And because, again, we do not want to re-victimize the victim. Also, don't think that you're bothering law enforcement by reaching out to them. I get it. Reaching out to law enforcement, especially doing a cold call, might be intimidating at first. When you're like, hey, I'm with this organization. This guy Dave told me to call, and so that's what I'm doing. Yeah, you can put it on me. Say, I listened to the speaker. He's kind of a weird guy, but he told me that I should call you guys, and that's why I'm making a call. Start building that relationship. If you, say, are planning a gathering, a public gathering, even if it's a protest, no matter how peaceful the protest or gathering you expect it to be, I would call law enforcement beforehand because they would much rather hear about it beforehand than hear about it while it's happening. Because if you hear about it while it's happening, then law enforcement's like going in reactive mode. Like, okay, what's their situation? Is there a problem? What do we have to do? If they hear about it from you a week beforehand, oh, okay, let's talk about it. What do you expect, et cetera. I know some people in the activist community are like, well, we don't want them to shut us down or anything else. No, law enforcement is not interested in shutting you down. They are just interested in planning the event. And then if they receive information during the event, they know who to call. They have a point of contact. And it's also an opportunity for you to control the narrative. So if the secular hub would much rather have local law enforcement hear about the secular hub from the secular hub representatives and not your opponents, where they start warping misinformation about you guys. So get control of that information early. Okay. Even if you've never communicated with law enforcement before, even if something happens tomorrow before you've had a time to establish this relationship, please don't hesitate to report a hate crime and to report it early on. So a lot of people sometimes make the mistake, again, with the best of intentions, but they're like, well, I don't have enough information, I don't think, to report. Or it's still, the situation isn't over yet. It still hasn't resolved, so maybe I should wait till it's over. Or I have the organization or the information, but it's not organized. And I'd really rather get my ducks in a row before contacting law enforcement, because I don't want to feel like an idiot when I contact law enforcement. Sometimes they don't know who to call. Or sometimes they're just embarrassed by the situation. Again, unless you've been in their shoes, don't underestimate that. I understand all of that, but it is best to report to law enforcement as early as possible. You can report it to me. Again, I'm informal. I can talk you through some things. I can get you over those hurdles. But some evidence, whether it's in a cyber matter and a physical security matter, some evidence is perishable. And the most amount of evidence that an agent or a detective can collect is at the very beginning of investigation, even while the crime is still happening. And if you don't do that, again, I completely understand, but then still report it, even if it's late. We've reported stuff, even if it's happened weeks or even months after the fact. One, because you want to build that pattern of behavior that investigators can rely on later. Two, it helps, again, represent the Freethought community that this many crimes are happening against us. Yes, it's real. We have stuff happening against us. And you never know when one of those dots that you contribute might be connected by an intelligence analyst to a dot down the road that could be helpful to law enforcement. All right. We have a lot of great work that is being done in this community by a lot of great people. These are just the national organizations. This doesn't even factor all of the backbone of local organizations that we have across the country, right? We should do whatever we can to protect the work that they do and to protect the people that are doing it yet. And if you haven't experienced these crimes yet, that's great, but still be vigilant and still establish those partnerships early before you need them. These are the goals for my initiative, Freethinkers Supporting Safe Streets. Today we've concentrated mostly on the second two bullet points there. The first point about freethinkers that are currently in law enforcement are something that I want to emphasize for a couple of reasons. One, because they can be tremendous allies for us. Okay? These are people of like minds, understanding, very kindred spirits even, if you will. But freethinkers in law enforcement are also wonderful examples of how people in our community can be brave, loyal, compassionate, without religion. Now, I know that's an obvious statement to everybody in this room, but that is something that the public needs to know and needs to be reminded of, and something that's applicable to freethinkers in every profession. And I'm speaking from my own profession, so that's what I'm going to go with here. And although we're not going to name law enforcement officers, we're not going to give their names out to the public unless we get their permission, we are going to emphasize the service and the value that freethinkers in law enforcement have to the community. All right. Well, the other part of why that can be important is that I'm trying to build trust between the secular community and law enforcement. One of the reasons to do that and ways to do that is to show that there are people in the secular community in law enforcement. The latest research shows, the latest Pew survey, shows that 29% of US adults describe themselves as religiously unaffiliated. Okay? You have 19% say that they're nothing in particular, you have 5% say that they're agnostic, 5% say that they're atheist. Okay, the 19%, nothing in particular, people aren't sure what that means. Let's just be extremely conservative and go with the 5% agnostic and 5% atheist, okay? There are 800,000 law enforcement officers in this country. There are over 100 FBI agents in the Denver division alone. There are 1,400 officers with Denver PD, okay? Take those percentages that we talked about and apply them to law enforcement numbers. If we only have one freethinker in every agency, that would be a tremendous resource. And we definitely have more than one. So we have freethinkers in law enforcement. These are the connections that we can make, okay? So contact me at the Freethought Society. If you want updates about what our initiative is going to do, we're going to have regular updates. If you're a freethinker in law enforcement, if you want to support freethinkers in law enforcement, if you want to work with all of law enforcement, either with liaison, with planning, with contacting them, let me know. And of course, if you are the victim of a hate crime, or if you want to help victims of hate crimes, contact me and be a part of this initiative that the Freethought Society is starting. This project is about members of our community being safer, okay? That's what we want to do. But it's also about members of our community feeling safer, okay? So with the connections we make at the national and local level, I think we can make that happen. Now, before we jump into the Q&A session, I just want to say a word of appreciation to all of you. When I was on my own spiritual journey around 2002, the Freethought and secular community was a breath of fresh air for me and a beacon of strength. It was local groups like this that changed my life. And even though I've been pretty quiet for the past 2 decades, except for making some donations to secular causes, I want to let you know that the visibility of your group, both in physical meetings like this and online, really matters to people who are under the radar, like I was. And I know that with all of the attacks on church-state separation in our community that are visible today, as well as everything else that is going on, I know that individual activism can sometimes feel very small, like a drop in the bucket sometimes. But it is absolutely not. And there's others out there that support you. And the movements of free thought and humanism and secular activism, it's not a bucket. They are rivers. And they are rivers that are fed by creeks and streams and drops. So if you feel like a drop sometimes, be proud of it, because we need those rivers running strong. And the more you do and the more that you can do, keep at it. You make a bigger impact than you realize, and you help a lot more people than you know. So, thanks for your time today.